Speed. I'm also a member of the Irish Woodturners Guild. Now, the Irish Woodturners Guild is an association that's it's there to promote and nurture the craft of wood turning on the island of Ireland. There are about 20 clubs or chapters, and there's quite a lot of members of the men's shed that are also members of the IWG, or the Irish Woodturners Guild. It's more a brother organisation. It doesn't be in competition. So that's my background. I've been turning for about 15 years. And I recently started to do this on a full-time basis. What I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about health and safety in direct relation to wood turning and wood turning only. Now, one of the things that I do want to say to you is that I am not going to be speaking about any health and safety regulations. Health and safety regulations are something that's dealt with by the National Executive of the Men's Shed and the Health and Safety Officers in each men's shed. What I'm going to try and do today is talk about a practical, common sense approach to enjoying your wood turning and to keep yourself as safe as possible. That's my goal and that's my aim. So with that in mind, I'm going to continue on and talk to you about various issues. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to talk about is basically the workshop. It's common sense, really, and a very wise person once said to me that common sense is actually not so common. But one of the things with wood turning is to try and keep your shed as clean and as tidy as possible. Now, the reason for that is twofold. Number one is it reduces slips, trips, and falls. And this is the lathe behind me here. And this item can spin it up to 1,000, up to 4,000 revs per minute. And if you get yourself entangled in this in any way, you're looking at a serious accident. So the fact is that a slip and a trip may not be in itself serious, but if you put out your hand to save yourself, and you put your hand in a bandsaw, you put your hand in a table saw, or a lathe that's actually in operation, you can end up with a serious injury. So but keeping your workshop clean and tidy, you're actually reducing the chances of any slips, trips, and falls. And the second thing that I would say to you is adequate lighting. Now, your workshop has two specific types of lighting. The first lighting is the lighting that's in your ceilings or on your walls that light up your entire area. And the second lighting that you have is what we call task lighting. Now, task lighting will be something that will be on the lathe and will actually specifically light up a particular task that you do. It also would apply to working with a bandsaw, it would apply to working with chisels and that. You would have a light that's shone into a particular area to light up the task you're actually doing. The thing about lighting is it's twofold. Number one is it makes everything more enjoyable. If you can see what you're doing, you're not straining your eyes. So it becomes much easier. And the second thing you do is by having proper lighting, you have less chance or risk of an accident. It really is common sense and it's simple as that. But that's basically what I would say. So to summarize, keep your workshop or your shed, keep it clean, keep it tidy. And secondly, have enough lighting that's adequate to do whatever you're actually doing. Don't be straight in your eyes. So that is that section. Again, we will talk about that later on. If people have any questions about lighting and stuff like that, I'll be more than happy to go into greater detail later on. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is probably one of the most important parts of this entire thing. And it's actually about the hidden dangers of wood turning and woodworking in general, and that's dust. Now, we as wood turners are exposed a little bit more to dust than a lot of wood workers will be. And the reason I say that is we're inclined to work with different types of wood. We have 3 different types of wood that we work with. We work with exotic woods such as cocobolo, ebony, pink ivory, wenge, makoti. They're all unusual woods. But wood turners will tend to buy these in wood turning supplies, or they'll be given those and they're inclined to turn them. Now, with exotic and strange woods comes exotic and strange dust particles. And those things may not be the same as a bit of pine or a bit of ash. Your body may not be used to them, and it can create problems. And the second type of wood that we are inclined to be using is poisonous woods. Now, we're very fortunate in Ireland. There's really only 3 main trees that are actually poisonous. One is yew. It's normally seen around graveyards and that. Now, woodworkers will use a bit of yew, but wood turners absolutely love it. It's a fantastic wood to turn it. The second one is laburnum. Laburnum is found in a lot of gardens. It's a decorative tree that has yellow flowers on it. It's a very beautiful tree. Now, both of those trees are 100% poisonous. So from the leaves to the fruit, to the bark, to the wood, to the roots, 100% poisonous. And that doesn't mean that you can't use them and turn them, but it does mean that you have to be careful of where those uses are, where you're going to actually use that wood, or what the end use of the wood is. For instance, yew can't be used with anything food related. Similarly with laburnum. One of the other trees that is very common, particularly in cities in Dublin and Cork, is a tree called robina. And robina is, again, it's 100% poisonous, but again, a beautiful wood to turn. So you need to be very careful of those. So reducing the wood particles that get into your lungs is vitally important. And the final wood that wood turners use a lot is spalted wood. Now, spalted beech is by far the most common one you'll hear about in Ireland. You'll see spalted hornbeam, and you'll also see spalted oak, ash, or sycamore. But what spalt is just before the wood starts to rot, it becomes infected with a fungi. And the fungi you will see either black lines, red lines, or white lines that will go through the wood. It creates beautiful character in the wood. We love using it. Again, you don't want to be getting spores into your lungs. So that's really important. So that's the dangers that wood turners would be more exposed to than the standard chippy or carpenter or the guy that's doing a little bit of furniture making, where he's using a bit of pine or a bit of mahogany. Now, teak is one that wood turners don't really like, and neither does woodworkers, because the dust is rather nasty. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you 2 different items. And the 2 different items that we have, I'm going to remove them here, and I'm going to bring them over to you and show you what they are. So I'm just going to turn the camera down a little bit towards the floor here. And I'm going to bring in this. And this is a shop vacuum. As you can see, it's really what it is a Hoover on steroids. It's designed specifically to work with dust in a workshop more than the dust that you're going to get on your carpet. And you can get adapters. The guys here, this is belonging to the men's shed here, and the guys have actually used an adapter to turn it into a standard Hoover. But this particular 4-inch pipe here will actually attach onto a lot of machines, and you can reduce the dust. I would particularly say that you should be using a dust extraction system of some type when you're actually working on the lathe. And the second machine, and I'm just going to get it here for you, I'm just going to have the camera for a moment, is a thing called an air cleaner. This air cleaner, I'm going to put it down on the ground here. Actually, here, I'll hold it here. And we can see this air cleaner here hangs from the ceiling. And what this does is it normally works on a remote control. It has 3 settings of power settings: medium, and high, low, medium, high. And it also will have a timer which will allow it to go on for 1 hour, 2 hours, or 4 hours. Now, this particular brand is a Record Power. I'm not promoting Record Power in any way. There are loads of other brands such as Jet and SIP that actually make air cleaners. That is an air cleaner. I'm going to put this away, and then I'm going to speak to you and tell you what it does. Just going to bring the camera up. And there we go. So what an air cleaner will actually do is it will take the hidden and dangerous particles. Remember, the most dangerous particles are the ones you can't see, tiny ones. And what it does is it takes the entire area, it brings it through a HEPA filter, and it takes the dust out of the air, and it sends out clean air. Now, you get a different size for different size workshops. That particular one here is suitable for this particular environment. For other areas, you may need a bigger one. There are different sizes. They're not extraordinarily expensive. They're about the same price as any power tool. So you're looking at both either of the shop vac or the air cleaner. They range from between 250 to 500 euros. Sounds like a lot of money when you say it fast, but when you consider that a decent drill or a decent saw will cost you the same, these are something that's going to keep you safe. You can't really put a price on safety. So an air cleaner and a dust extraction system. There are different systems as well. There are a system, a dust extraction system that is designed specifically for large workshops. And you may even have them located outside because they can be quite noisy, with a pipe coming in and different pipes that are actually plumbed around a workshop. But again, that's if you get into a professional setup, you don't really need to be doing that if you're just a hobby turner. So that's your dust extraction. Now, with that said, that is the section. So to summarize that, what I'm actually saying is keep your air clean. And if you keep your air clean, you're keeping your lungs safe. Because remember that we're going to be talking now in a second about PPE, which is personal protective equipment. And personal protective equipment will involve a dust mask. But remember that in a lot of the cases when you finish doing a lot of the dirty work, you're going to take off the dust mask, say for finishing or for other work, or even for having a cup of tea in the workshop. Don't forget that there's still dust particles in the air. So the air cleaner is actually going to clean that. So that's that section. Now, the next section I'm going to move on to is PPE. Now, and that's called personal protective equipment. That's the short for it. Now, I have here a thing called a wood turning smock. Now, we're going to talk about clothing first. There is one major no-no in clothing, and it's really, really important. There's no compromise in this. You never go near a wood turning lathe with a hoodie that has a string on it, here, ever. Full stop, you just don't do it. And the same with strings here that are attached around your waist. And the other thing is, in certain workings, they will have a tab here that will you will allow to close, make things tight around your waist. Do not approach a lathe with those. This item is spinning at, again, like I said, at least 1,000. Standard wood turning practice, this will be turning at between 600 and 1,500 RPM, which is revolutions per minute. You don't have time to pull away because you in before you have a chance to pull away. So that's one of the things. One of the really nice investments that you can make if you're doing wood turning as a hobby, or if you're doing it full time, is a wood turning smock. Now I'm just going to stick this wood turning smock on. I bought it when I was a little bit thinner, so excuse me to say that it's a little bit tight. But basically, a wood turning smock has a couple of features that your normal clothing doesn't have. First thing it has here, which is very obvious, is it has a little tab that closes around your neck. And what that does is it prevents all the shavings when you're doing actually wood turning getting into your clothes. And any of you that does wood turning as a hobby, you realise that shavings gets into your in under your t-shirts. It gets on your clothes. It gets caught up in your jumpers and things like that. It can be quite awkward. A wood turning smock is really handy. So it closes completely off, and you have no chance of getting. There are different varieties of this. You can get them in a short sleeve and a long sleeve. You can close them. Close here, as you can see. You can close them up. And if you notice that that has no tabs in it, there's actually just two Velcro patches. Close together. You have no dust getting up here. And the most important thing about a wood turning smock, just going to turn that down slightly, is if I turn around, the pockets are actually located here in the back. And what that actually does is it stops any of the dust getting into your pockets and the shavings getting into your pockets. Any of you that have done some wood turning and you go to take out your phone or go to take out something out of your pocket and you bring out a fistful of shavings with it, it's one of the things that a wood turning smock will do. These are relatively inexpensive. You can get them for between 40 to 90 euros. You can get them in a variety of colour shades, and you can also get them in different materials. There's a heavy-duty wood turning smock that you might use in the winter time. There's a much lighter version you can get. Again, short sleeve, long sleeves. You normally have 4 colours. They come in blue, which is the one we have as the colour of our club channel side wood turners. We also have, it comes in green, which is very common, bottle green, a sort of a light over grey, and you may get them in a sort of a blue, purpley or blue colour as well. Those are the colours that they're a bit limited that way. But again, the variety of different material makes it quite pleasant to work with. That's just smock. Now there is a thing that I have a pet hate with, and this is something that is a little bit controversial. A lot of wood turners won't agree with me on this, but I would be very firm in saying that you should never approach or work with a lathe in sandals. I think it's a massive no-no for 2 reasons. Number one is when you're actually turning loads of wood, you're actually getting lots of shavings, and those shavings are going to fall onto the floor. If you're wearing open-toe sandals or that, those shavings are getting between your foot, between your skin and the footwear. If you get something that sticks in your foot, it's an awful lot more difficult to get it out than it is if it's stuck in your finger. Number one, you can't see it. And number 2, it has a tendency, because you're putting weight on it, to actually travel up into your body. And it can end up in a trip to either the hospital or a doctor to actually get it removed. And it can also mean that you can be off your feet for quite a while if you have a hole on your foot, because you had to have a splinter or something removed. Don't forget also that if you have woods such as Cocobolo, yew, laburnum, or blackthorn is another one, those woods, if they pierce your skin, that can cause wood poisoning and septicemia. So really stay away from it. And the second, and probably the most important thing, is I'm just going to grab here a wood turning chisel. This, guys, is a wood turning chisel. And you can imagine that falling from 3 feet and falling onto your toes. That's nasty. And that's a nasty accident. That's a trip to the casualty straight away. It's definitely a few stitches and possibly the loss of a toe. I do know one person, an American guy, that actually lost a toe because his skew chisel, which is another wood turning tool, actually fell and sliced his toe off, the same as we put it on the saw. So really, guys, don't wear sandals. That's all I'm saying to you. Now we're going to move on to the next thing, and what we're going to move on to is eye protection. Now, eye protection, there are safety glasses. These are a pair of safety glasses. They look like spectacles, but they're actually safety glasses. They have a rated safety feature. They're impact resistant. But I would say that when you're actually turning, you should always have some sort of protection for your eyes. You have pieces of wood coming off at quite a speed. You only need one shaving to hit your eye, and you can lose the sight of it very simple. So just don't ever approach a lathe and use it without some sort of eye protection. There is another thing, which is a face shield. Really, this would be the ideal. This is ideal. If we put a face shield on, a face shield is, I can't actually wear this and talk to you because it will distort the sound. But what a face shield does is it protects your entire face from an impact of either shavings or a piece of wood coming off the lathe, actually. So it's going to save you from injury. So that's your eyes and your face protected with a face shield. And then what we're going to actually talk about is dust protection. Now, everybody is familiar this day and age. It needs no introduction, and that is the mask, the standard mask you have. I'm looking at the guys here in the men's shed, and they all have COVID masks on. They are sufficient, and they will protect you, and they will protect your body from dust. However, if I just have 2 things here, and I'll show you the things that we will use as full-time wood turners. This is a trend. Now, I'm not promoting the brand. There are several masks like this. This mask would fit Now, I'm not going to speak to it because it'll sound like you're man of the Batman. What's his name? Craig or Preggers. That is the mask. Now, this is very versatile. These are filters, and you can get different filters for different purposes. So you can get a dust filter. You can also get a filter that will protect you from odors and chemicals such as paint and lacquer and things like that. So you can get different different filters for these masks. They're very versatile. They're actually very comfortable as well to wear. Even in hot weather, they don't actually sweat up too much. That is a step up from your standard cold mask or dust mask. Again, what I use is one of these. Now, these come in a variety of different makes. Again, this is a trend. And what this is both a full face shield and it's also a full mask. And if I turn the back of it here, you can see your entire your entire head is enclosed. There are various different makes and models of this. There's this particular one here. And when you turn it on, it's battery powered. You can actually hear it operating. And that sucks all the air in. There's filters that are located in this area here. It sucks all the air in, make sure that it's clean, and pushes it out. So one of the things that it does that's really good, from anyone that wears spectacles knows that when you put on a mask, your spectacles, your glasses get all fogged up. And particularly in cold weather, one of the things that does, that completely eliminates that. That means that you can wear your normal eyewear, your glasses that you're comfortable with. You can put this on. You don't have to wear another mask in it. You put that on, you turn it on, and you're safe, 100% safe for 100% of the time that you're working. And it also has an impact-resistant area on the face of it, and that's going to actually make things quite safe for you to operate. They're specifically designed for the likes of wood turners. Like that one is a trend. There are makes with Axminster makes them, and then there's other ones which one of the biggest wood turners that we have in Ireland, one of those famous wood turners is Glenn Lucas, and he has a face shield that actually works with a canister on the back of it. So the actual shield just goes on, and then there's a canister down here that replaces the canister. So there is various different models of these, and you'll be able to have a look at this later on. You can look into it. They're quite expensive. This item here is around between around 300 to 400 euros. I don't know the actual price because the prices of things have changed quite considerably. But I believe I paid 295 euros for that quite a while ago. That just give you an idea of what you're doing. Now, we're now going to move on from that's your PPE. So if we So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to the part that most people would have actually expected me to start with. I'm going to move on to a lathe. I'm going to give you just a very quick overview of the parts of the lathe, very, very quickly. I'm not going to go into any great details on what it is. I'm just going to explain to you the various items of what to do. So what we have here is this part of the lathe is known as the headstock. And if you think about head and the brains, that's where, this is the thing that makes the lathe work. You have the bed race. If you think about a bed, you're going to lie flat on the bed. This is the bed race. You have, for some reason, this is called a banjo. Don't ask me why. I don't have any reason or any knowledge as to why it is. I'm sure that someone with a little bit more knowledge than me can tell you that. And finally, you have the tool rest. The tool rest is height adjustable, probably one of the most important parts of the lathe. And the last thing you have is the tailstock. And the part that goes on the tailstock is called a quill. And it goes in and out. So that's the three parts of the lathe. Now, lathes normally, most modern lathes now have a thing called variable speed. And variable speed is actually a fantastic safety feature that's been developed. And it makes operating a lathe so much safer than it did in the old days. in the olden days, there was 3 or 4 or 5 belts, and you picked from 3 or 4 or 5 speeds. And as a particular piece of wood that you were putting on the lathe didn't like the speed it was going at, tough. But nowadays we're able to control speed, and it's a really important part of wood turning. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about mounting pieces of wood on the lathe. And what I mean by mounting is anything that you put on a lathe and you're going to turn it and use whatever tool that you're going to use on it, or you're going to sand it. That's called mounting a piece of wood on a lathe. Now, I have here a very simple piece of wood. This is what we call a spindle blank. Okay? And this piece of wood, you will turn this around, and you may, for instance, that could be used for a candlestick. It may be used for a railing. It could be used for a leg of a chair, although it might be a little bit small, but a leg of a stool, or numerous other things, or it could be cut out into sections used for decorative boxes. Very, very versatile. But this would be an average spindle blank, one that I brought from home. This is actually just a piece of 3 by 3, great piece of wood that you could just practice on. These are spindle blanks. I just want to leave them to one side. And I'm going to show you the other type of blank wood that you would have. And this would be what you would turn a bowl from. It's a bowl blank. Now the difference between these 2 pieces of wood is important for the way they're mounted. The grain on this wood is traveling in this direction. Okay? And the wood will be mounted on the lathe in this orientation here. So the wood is the grain is traveling in this direction. That's quite important. This is what we call in the trade spindle turning. This is typically what we call a bowl blank, or a blank piece, wood turning blank, but we normally would just call it a bowl blank. And you don't have to turn a bowl out of it or a platter out of it. You can do loads of different things with it, but we just call this a bowl blank. Very often these won't be cut into a circle. I have a kind friend that actually he think about 40 or 50 of these pieces of sycamore, and he gave me a couple of them. And when I was going out this morning, I thought this was quite nice to bring down and show you on the camera. It gives you an idea. Now this is mounted on a lathe. This would be far too big for this lathe. That is mounted on a lathe. And the orientation and spindle grain direction is across. And normally this is mounted in 2 ways. This is mounted either on a chuck or on a faceplate. You would do some of it between centres, but normally that would be the way that this is done. So I'll just leave that down and explain to you the difference. If I just look now, I'm just looking for a faceplate, which I have one here. This is a faceplate. A faceplate has holes in it, as you can see the air coming through the holes. And these holes are countersunk at the back, and you would screw this onto a piece of timber. Now, normally this would be used for the likes of a bowl blank, and it's not used for end grain. Now, there's a reason for that. Any of you that are carpenters and chippies and stuff like that, you know that if you try to put screws into the end of a piece of timber, you're going with the grain, and you don't get the same adhesion, you don't get the same grip as if you go in this way. Now, the reason for that is wood. The best way to describe wood on a microscopic level is if you can imagine a bunch of straws in a jar, a bunch of drinking straws in a jar. You can see them in McDonald's. That's what wood is like. It has tiny little straws that runs up and down the wood. So if you imagine a tree is growing, the grain is in this direction with the growth of the tree. So if you try putting a screw into the end of a piece of wood, you're actually just going into the center of the grain, so you're not actually rip it on you. So these would normally be used, not exclusively, but they would normally be used on side lathe. They fit onto the lathe. This won't come off. I'm not going to try and take them off, but they go on instead of this. This is a chuck, which is the second way of mounting it. And if you're mounting with spindles, you're doing a thing called between centers. So this here is a step center and a step drive, or step drive and a step center. And you would put your pieces of wood between this and you would turn with compression. Okay? Awesome. So I've now found the tool for removing the chuck. What I'll do is we're going to remove it from the lathe. This is your spindle. I'll just show you what the face actually looks like on the lathe. And if we turn the speed right down, this is what this piece looks like. Now, that gives you an idea. So one thing that I want to talk about is mounting a piece of timber. And I'm going to get a piece of rescued firewood the lads have here. This is it here, and I'm just going to show you something that works. Put this back on. And we're going to mount this piece onto it. I'm going to, normally I would mark centers on this, but for reasons that you're going to see in a moment, I actually don't want to do that. Now, I'm going to step to this side and I'm going to show you. When I turn this on, it is not necessarily going to be balanced. I'm just going to turn this on. Sure, my speed is off. Okay. Now this lathe at the moment here is quite comfortable to take that particular piece of timber, and I've done a good job in actually mounting it very close to the centers. But if I bring the speed of this up, you will see that as the speed increases, so does the vibrations, and you can actually hear that sound. Hear that, guys? Okay, so that means that that piece of wood is not actually balanced. And what I've demonstrated to you here is the correct way of actually putting a piece of rough timber, a piece of timber that hasn't been previously turned onto a lathe, and the safest way of actually assessing it and working. So what you're doing is you're putting this piece of timber onto the lathe. You're turning it down to the lowest possible speed, and you should always do this, always. You're turning your lathe on, and then you're gradually, very carefully building your speed up. And what you're doing is you're watching for vibrations. Or when you get to a speed that you're comfortable on, that you want to turn it, that's going to be good. But the most important thing is that you gradually build the speed up. Now, when you build the speed up, you will get a vibration in the lathe. And you will notice that the headstock here will start to vibrate. And that vibration has a certain frequency. It's going to vibrate. Suddenly, stop. As you'll get to a point where the vibrations will maximize, and then you'll just go slightly beyond it. And that's your optimal speed. But if you're not comfortable, or if the piece is very unbalanced or very dangerous, then you don't do that. You keep the speed right down low. But if you have a piece of timber such as this that we know is going to be very firm, that is in good condition, that doesn't have anything loose on it, we can use that technique to actually get to the correct speed. One of the most important things on safety-wise is when you're turning on your lathe, you never stand in this location directly in front of it. If something is coming off the lathe, it is coming off more or less perpendicular to the bedways. It's going to come off directly in this direction. So I know the camera is not going to show this, but it's actually coming at right angles out. So this area here, directly in front of the wood, is the impact area that you're going to be in line with when it happens. So you try to avoid standing in that position as much as possible. Even when you're turning, try and stay to one side. So when I'm turning this on, I'm completely out of the way. If anything goes wrong, this is coming off. It's going off in that direction, or it's going off up here, but it's not going to hit me. That's the important thing. So when you're turning your lathe on, never stand directly in front of the piece of timber, ever. And that applies for even if you're working with a piece of timber. Now, the second thing I'd say to you is, not only is your eyes very important when you're watching something that's being done, but also your hearing. For those of us that have decent hearing, you need to be listening to the wood. And what I mean by that is there's a thing in wood called a shake. And what a shake actually is a hidden crack in a piece of timber. I'm going to get really close to the camera here. I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up, but just there, just see there, there's a line and a crack in the timber, right? And that crack or line can be in the center of a piece of timber. And as you work and turn away that timber, there's less and less of the timber there, or it's not being supported. And that crack, you will hear that sound. You will only need to hear the sound once. And believe me, guys, if you hear that sound, you stop the lathe. You investigate, you find out where that crack is, and you assess whether it's safe to continue turning or not. It's really, really important. I can't stress to you how important it is. If there's a hidden crack, that you stop, you assess, you keep it safe. Now, one of the areas that this will happen with is in bowl turning. In bowl turning, as you turn away large amounts of timber, you're left with a rather thin wall of a bowl. And if there's a hidden crack or that, it can actually run in, depending on what direction and where it is, it can create a weakness. And this is where your speed is really important. If you're turning your bowl at too fast a speed, the actual centrifugal force, which is, as you spin something, everything wants to go out. So once you start spinning, it wants to go out. So you can imagine playground rides where you will see things spinning and you'll see kids and they're right back against the wall of it. If you turn on another thing that's centrifugal force, if you turn on something that's really wet, green timber on a lathe, the water is pushed outwards. So it's the same thing. So as it spins, that force has been exerted. And if there's a crack or something in it, it can cause the bowl to fail. Now, if it's failing and it starts to come apart, you can get what we call a catastrophic failure, or literally the best way to describe it is an explosion, because that's exactly what it's like. And what happens is the bowl starts to come apart and it strikes this. Now, because it's not fully apart, it suddenly is creating a jerk, and that jerk is going to blow everything apart. I've had a couple of failures, in every wood turner comes across it at some stage. And let's be diplomatic about it and say that I've gone in and sat down and had a cup of tea and reevaluated my life. It's scary. It really is scary, guys. If it happens here, you know about it. But to avoid that is, listen, you'll hear the change in the tone, and it's very distinctive. You'll know if you're turning that there's something wrong, that sound shouldn't be there. that hollow tinny sound is coming up. There's something wrong. Get it checked out. If you're not sure yourself and you're in the men's shed, get one of the experienced wood turners that may be available. Say, here, listen to this thing. What's going on here? It's a good idea. Okay, so that's now. What I've done is I've talked about how to mount pieces onto the lathe. So really, what you have is between centers is what we call spindle turning. To summarize, the next plate is called face plate turning, and that's for bowls and that. And the last and most important one, and by far the most common, is a chuck. Now, you either do one or two things on a chuck. You either create a spigot, which is like a tenon, or you create a mortise or a recess. It's two ways. And there is certain types of times that you would use certain things. For instance, if you are mounting a spindle, so you're doing something with the end and you're mounting a spindle into a chuck, you will always use a tenon, because using a recess in the end grain of wood is actually a very weak grip. You don't get a proper grip. So you need to compress the end grains. Similarly, if you're going with side grain, such as this, you're going with side grain, you can either use a spindle or a recess. What you have to remember is that depending on the type of wood you're using, and again, this comes with experience, you can get a failure across the grain. So often a recess can be actually a good way of going. A lot of people will use a recess on these rather than a tenon, and you actually use up less wood. You know, you get more wood in the finish. But this is an experience thing and a personal preference. So you can use both a tenon or a recess on these, but you don't use a recess on end grain. That's just that height. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is tool control. And I'm just going to grab a chisel here. And what I'm going to say to you guys is, you should be very comfortable in your turn. There should be no strain in your shoulders. Excuse me, frog in my throat. No, there should be no strain in your shoulders. There should be no strain in your back or hips. And you should be very comfortable. And the correct way to hold a chisel or any wood turning tool is you're holding it firmly, but you're not getting a grip. It's not a death grip. You're just holding it nice and firm, and it's actually being controlled here. It's being held against your body. And the second one, which is going on the tool rest, all of what this hand here is doing, stopping it being lifted. You're really just controlling the final point. And this grip here should be nice and light. Your tool control. You're holding it against it. And what you're actually doing is you're moving your hips and your body. You're not actually moving your arms. You get a lot better control. Okay, you can see that? So that's what you're actually doing. The lathe should be at a very comfortable height. And this is a health and safety thing. If you're 6'4" and you're 5'2", the lathe is different heights for different people. And the perfect height is if you stand, your elbow should be more or less in the center. This is perfect height for me. If you look here, my elbow is more or less in line with the center. Very comfortable. Now, a couple of inches up or down on this, it's not going to make a massive difference, but it is going to produce your enjoyment. But if you're 6'4", like I'm 5'9". But if you're 6'4", you're actually going to be hunching down and trying to do it. That's just not comfortable. So you should be very comfortable with your lathe. So at home, adjust the height of your lathe to suit your body and your preferences. If you're going to someone like Glenn Lucas, who professionally teaches wood turning, he will have height adjustable lathes. And some of the lathes that actually are on the market, such as I'm going to say Vicmark is one of the makes. They actually have built-in height adjustments. So that's your tool control, really, what you're talking about. Now, the final thing that I'm going to say to you is your tools should be really, really sharp. And to sharpen wood turning tools, there's two ways. There's freehand and there's jigs. Now, I strongly recommend jigs. And even the professional turners, most of them will actually use jigs. But there is a train of thought in the school of people that actually freehand. They turn they sharpen their tools by freehand. They don't use a jig. What actually happens with that is that you end up using an awful lot more tool speed. You go through your tools. And the other thing that happens is, especially with beginners, you don't get a consistently sharp, correct tool. Now, if I go to bring this tool in, and this tool is sharpened perfectly. And if you look at that, you can see that that tool has a perfectly even grind. Bring it in a bit further. You can see the grind is actually very neat, clean, and it's really sharp. So it's perfect for wood turning. This particular tool has what we call a fingernail grind. There are loads of different grinds on your tools. Every tool has a different purpose and a different way. Keep your tools sharp. Use your jigs. Use a slow grinder or a wet grinder rather than the fast grinders. The standard grinders that you see in the hardware store are really not suitable for wood turning. You should invest in either a slow grinder and a set of jigs. It's going to be an investment up front, but it actually is going to save you money in buying tools over the years. And it's also going to improve your enjoyment and your skills, because you're working with the same tool, the same cut, and you're going to develop a thing called muscle memory. In other words, it becomes second nature to you. You don't have to think about all the technical aspects. They're just second nature to you. Think about it. How many of you drive? Do you think about every single action that you do when you're driving? You don't. You automatically change gears. You slow down at the right time. You don't consciously go through it. You just do it because it becomes second nature. That's what we call muscle memory. That's the same thing with wood turning. It becomes very enjoyable when you can turn. Now, having said that, your concentration when you're turning is 100% on that machine. You shouldn't be trying to do this and talk to this person. You shouldn't be listening out to somebody else, something that's going on somewhere else. Your attention should be 100% on the machine. If I'm going to say anything from safety point of view today, if there's one thing you take away from it, is when you're actually wood turning and when you turn that machine on, you keep your attention on that machine and nowhere else. And that's going to make your life, it's going to make you, firstly, more enjoyable, secondly, a hell of a lot safer. So with that, guys, I'm going to actually end the presentation. And thank you very much for your time and your patience. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take any questions that people want.